So now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Diane Boyd. So Dr. Boyd has 4 decades of applied expertise on behavior, conservation, and management of wild wolf populations. She began her career in Minnesota and then moved to Montana to study gray wolf recovery in the Rocky Mountains. She has done tons of research and consultation all over the Rocky Mountains, British Columbia, Alberta, even the Mexican Wolf Recovery Program, and wolf research in Italy and Romania. She received her MS and PhD from the University of Montana.
Go Grizz!
And she is presently an affiliate faculty member at the University of Montana. She recently retired from Montana FWP as the Region 1 wolf and carnivore specialist, but is continuing her wolf conservation efforts on a broader scale through teaching and writing. So her debut memoir, A Woman Among Wolves, My 40-Year Journey Through Wolf Recovery, was just released in September 10th, 2024, and Allie has a copy of those at the back if you want to pick up a copy, and Diane is happy to sign after this program. So that's all I've got, so welcome Diane, and I'll let you take it from here.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. Am I on? Am I on? Okay, not on. Let's see. Well, it says I'm on. Let's try this. How about that? That better? For you. Can you all hear me? Okay. So I want to thank the Montana Historical Society and Lewis and Clark Library and y'all for being here. Wolves are... Nobody's neutral about wolves, I can tell you that much. It's a fun topic to talk about, and rather than just talk about the ecology and science of wolves, I'm bringing people into our talk tonight, because people like to hear about people relationships with each other and wildlife. And everybody can hear me, right? Okay, so we could dim the lights, if you would, please. Thank you. So this is an artist's rendition of red wolves and gray wolves fighting over a large prehistoric North American bison. Red wolves, excuse me, not red wolves, dire wolves. They're red in color. Dire wolves and gray wolves, which did overlap a little bit in time, and I'm going to talk about all this hype about the dire wolves that has come up lately, a little bit later in my talk, but I love that slide. So people have long had a complicated relationship with wolves. From the afraid of everything, the people, throwing people off of sleighs, to the wolves in the Russian, the Troyokis, blah, 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 to wolves do no harm to anybody, and they're just these wonderful, adorable animals that should live out their lives without harassment. Well, wolves have to live in between these two extremes. So that's what I'm here to talk about, is the realities, myths, and some ecology about wolves. We're going to cover early human-wolf relationships. How many of you have dogs? Yeah, I just spent the day out with my dogs. Domestication of wolves to become dogs. How, why, and when perceptions of wolves changed. The status of wolves in Montana and the West. Managing a wild wolf populations. And then I'll finish up with the book. So, I got this amazing diorama of a museum in a small town in France. It was a Paleolithic site, cave people, 300,000 years ago. And they had these amazing dioramas depicting people fending off dire wolves. And I just love that. Well, this was, in our early times, early history, I'm sure that wolves killed people. Absolutely. Did people kill wolves? Absolutely. Did wolves and people compete? Yes, they're eating the same food. Did wolves and people cooperate? That is kind of an interesting question, and when I was doing research for my book, I looked up this article by Schlecht and Schulterman, and in their article, it's called Coevolution of Human and Canids. It's in the Journal of Evolution and Cognition. They postulated that wolves and people live in similar family groups, and that early hominids, cavemen for all it's worth, watched wolves running down big game, and wolves would hunt for a long time till they got a weak one, and then only at that point in time the wolves are in jeopardy of being killed when they go to make the last coup de grace on their their designated prey animal, and they'd stand around and, I mean, if you think about it, trying to kill a bison with your mouth and you're a wolf, it's really daunting, and wolves die by being killed. Well, their theory was that people, on the other hand, couldn't run like wolves, and they didn't run down their game, but they'd use their brains and they'd get an animal cornered, and then they'd use spears or atlatls or something from a distance. They could kill the animal without jeopardizing themselves being killed like that. So their theory is that people, early hominids, put the two together, and if they saw wolves in the midst of a chase and have an animal cornered, that humans then went up to the scene and stepped in and killed whatever the prey animal was and drove the wolves off, chased them away, beat them, killed them, whatever. And when the people took what they wanted and left, then the wolves had the leftovers. And that is their theory about how wolves and people first began cooperating in a relationship. It's plausible. I'm not saying it's right. The nice thing about being a paleontologist is nobody can prove you wrong. It's all theory. A scientist are under skeptical eyes all the time. So that was sort of the early potential relationship of human and wolves. We definitely fought and competed and killed each other at times. But the dog is the first and only large carnivore really to be domesticated. We've had lions and bears in captivity, but there's still lions and bears, and now we go from wolves through domestication to dogs. And it began about 30,000 years before present. And livestock domestication of our swine and horses and cattle and sheep began about 11,000 years ago. So we had already domesticated dogs 20,000 years before from wolves, before we got livestock. So the wolf-human relationship changed when our early people, hunter-gatherers, became livestock growers. And all of a sudden now, we were directly competing. The wolves were competing with us for our livestock, which we have taken in and bred and raised to be animals that are dumb and slow and stupid that we can handle. And so wolves became sort of a target. So it's been going on a long time, and people say, oh my gosh, Little Red Riding Hood. I said, oh, no, no, no. This hatred and fear of wolves goes way back to way before there's written language in Little Red Riding Hood. It's very, very old. So there's a couple of theories on how dogs were domesticated from wolves. And the first is the commensal scavenger hypothesis, and it basically says that wolves domesticated themselves by kind of hanging around and cleaning up scraps and offal and whatever, like village dogs when you're in poor countries. And the second idea is that cross-species adoption hypothesis, but that early peoples captured and reared wolf pups, took them out of the den, and nurtured them. And those that were capable of being tamed were selected for. And the ones that were too wild worked. And so we selected through tameness to get an animal that eventually became a dog. Has anybody here ever read a marvelous book called How to Tame a Fox and Create How to Tame a Fox and Create a Dog, something like that? Anyway, I'll tell you about it later in the Q&A, but it's a marvelous story about how we domesticated fox in Russia until they became basically sort of border collie-like animals bred from fox by selecting for tame generation after generation and interbreeding them. It's a pretty fascinating story. With pictures, it's all real. So anyway, these are the two hypotheses, and through DNA and archaeology studies, they've decided the first one is wrong, and that people actually did capture and raise and nurture wolves that became more of a cooperative wild wolf that became a domesticated wolf that became dogs. So we've continued to raise these animals to live amongst us. They sleep on our beds. Dogs continue to diverge from wolves through our heavy artificial selection pressure. And it's amazing what we've done to take a wolf and create a dog. Oops. There we go. I love this slide. So that's what we've done to wolves. So where are we at with wolves now? So I started with wolves in Minnesota. I still have a Minnesota accent. And when I was young, Minnesota was the only state in the lower 48 that had wolves, with the exception of about 25 on Isle Royal that crossed the frozen lake in about 1950. So by the 1930s, government programs and private trappers and citizens, but mostly through the use of poison, killed off all the wolves in the historic US, lower 48, except for Minnesota. It was pretty easy to do through the use of poisons, and I'm always amazed nowadays when people say, oh my God, the wolves are out of control, we'll never get rid of them. It's like, they were one of the easiest species to kill in the history of this country. We didn't kill off mountain lions, we didn't kill off coyotes. Wolves, you can get rid of. So it's a sad thought, but that's how it is. Well, the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973. How many in this room knew Bob Ream? He lived in Helena for years. Okay, Bob started the Wolf Ecology Project at the University of Montana in 1975. He was an avid conservationist, strong Democratic Party guy here, legislator and so forth. And he had lots of people getting reports of wolves occasionally coming into Montana. So he sent us graduate students, friends, family, dogs, whoever would go out and investigate reports of tracks that people had had, and to look to see if there are actually any wolves in Montana in the mid-70s. So this is the range of the gray wolf in North America. The dark orange is the current range, and we have to extend it now down into Colorado. And the former range included, there were wolves everywhere, essentially. And I'm sure there were wolves here, but it's just an artifact, I think, of sample. They didn't get samples. And then this is the red wolf, which is a little different animal. But they were everywhere, and they're making a good comeback now. So my story began, and I came to Montana in 1979. Bruce McClellan, grizzly bear biologist, and Joe Smith. Joe caught this first wolf, Kishnina, April 4th, 1979, put a radio collar on her. And she was a kind of middle-aged, young to middle-aged, beautiful silver wolf that had to have walked hundreds of miles to get here from Canada because wolves had been poisoned off also in southeastern BC and southwestern Alberta, and there weren't even hardly any wolves in Banff. So this wolf probably came from at least Banff or maybe beyond to Jasper. She walked down on her own fanfare. Nobody brought her. There was not the Secretary of Interior carrying pages through the R's. There was no money involved. And slowly, these wolves began finding their way walking down the Rocky Mountains. And a male wandered down on his own and joined Kishnina, as we named this wolf in 1979. And they had pups, and pretty soon we had wolves in the North Fork of the Flathead in the northwest corner of Montana through natural recovery, through dispersal. And it just drives me crazy. Nobody brought these wolves here. This happened 15 years before reintroductions to Yellowstone and Idaho. These are native animals. And I hear everybody talking about the wolves that were introduced to Montana. They were not. So they're native. This is a picture that Bob Ream actually took from an airplane in Glacier Park of the Magic Pack. And there's 11 wolves there in Sullivan Meadow and Glacier Park. That was our core group. We named it the Magic Pack because it was pretty magical that they survived to live to reproduce and that they were there. Does anybody here know Mike Fairchild? Anybody? Yeah. So Mike and I co-led the Wolf Project in the early years, and then Mike went on and got a real job working for the state, and I stayed with the wolf stuff. But we work in the early days. I'm taking blood here from a wolf pup. Pup is like 60 pounds in September. Mike's there doing it. And we did all of this kind of investigation before there was DNA, before there was GPS collars. We were in the field. We had tons of volunteers. And we tracked those wolves on the snow, and we went in the route that the wolves went. So we could see what kind of habitat they used, what they killed. When they pooped, we picked up the scats. We did scat analysis. It was really cool, old-fashioned field biology. We learned a lot about these wolves. And we backtracked them. We didn't want to forward track on their track because we didn't want to cause their behavior to be modified by our presence. We had scores of amazing volunteers. This is Amanda Hardy, and she's about 4'11", a tiny gal. But we waded the North Fork of the Flathead River every day in the winter with backpacks and skis and rubber waders that are up to here. And we get in the park and then track the wolves with the aid of telemetry. And a big part of my job on the project was I was the trapper. I learned how to trap wolves in Minnesota to radio collar. So in the summer, my job was to catch and collar wolves. In the winter, we followed several packs. It was pretty remarkable that nobody ever got injured or died, actually, because you're alone on skis in the backcountry of Glacier Park with no way to communicate, no radios, no GPSs. None of that stuff was wasn't around. So I'll point out here in the slide, here's his first axis is 1979 to 1995, and this is when wolves were reintroduced to central Idaho and Yellowstone Park. People are really unaware that there was a population, and it started, and by the time wolves were reintroduced in 1995, we had about 75 wolves up in northwest Montana that had walked down and found mates and bred. And they were in about 8 packs, plus a few individuals, loners, wandering around. One of the most amazing wolves we had, little wolf 8551, she was collared right near Glacier as a pup in 1985, small female, black. I recaptured her when she was a year and a half, put a new collar on her, and then she just disappeared in 1987. So this shows Glacier Park right here. This is the whole Rocky Mountain recovery area, but Glacier National Park, and she ended up disappearing in December, and in July, she was shot and killed there in the summer months. She had joined another pack. She was with 4 other wolves. And what the interesting note about this little wolf, so the reason we found out about it was because the guy who shot her, we wrote the phone number inside her radio collar. So he got a hold of the game warden and read the phone number, and they called. But what's really cool about this, here's Banff, here's Hinton, and here's Fort St. John. And the wolves taken for the reintroduction to Yellowstone and central Idaho came from Hinton and from Fort St. John's. And so what this wolf showed us is that it's one metapopulation of wolves, all the way up to where those wolves were taken from, all the way down. It's one population of wolves that's just a walkabout for a wolf. They're not foreign. They're all the same. And if this little wolf would have gone south instead of north, she would have been about 100 miles south of Yellowstone Park. So I've always believed wolves would have got there on their own without reintroductions. But here's the plan, wolf recovery, is that if they got here on their own in northwest Montana, they're fully endangered. And with the ones that were introduced, they have a different classification. It's called a non-essential experimental, where they're no longer fully endangered and they can be shot and managed. That was part of the concession to allowing them to be reintroduced. So they took the wolves and they reintroduced 35 into Idaho and 31 into Yellowstone, and then another 10 came from the Rocky Mountain front that where parents were killing livestock. They killed the adult wolves and they put the 10 pups down in Yellowstone. So those were native as well. What do we have going on here? Let's see. I hit the wrong button. Okay. So meantime, wolves, we got a population in Glacier and Yellowstone and Idaho, and eventually over time, through dispersal and mixing and mingling, they're now one big population, and then these wolves dispersed into Washington and Oregon and California. I mean, they're showing up in Utah. Yellowstone wolf made it down to the Grand Canyon. Wolves live by their feet, and they'll go anywhere that we don't shoot them. And as soon as they're delisted, other states take over wolf management, and every state sets its own regulations. And here's a huge long list of all the stuff that you can do to wolves nowadays. The wolves have been, it's very liberalized hunting and trapping seasons on them, and you can now, as of last year, one person can take 15 through trapping and 15 through shooting. So one person can take 30 wolves, and there's no limit to the number of licenses that people can take 30 wolves. That's a new law. But you can shoot them at night with predator lights and electronic calls and thermal imaging, and it's kind of war on wolves these days, basically. So people are concerned. I'm a hunter. I was bird hunting just this morning, and people want to know, well, what kind of impacts are wolves having on our game populations? So I'll switch to this side for a while. So this is an interesting study that Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks did, and this is published. You can go to their website. They collared 71 adult female moose Oh, they colored a lot more than that. There were 71 mortalities in 7 years that they looked at of all the moose that were collared. Over 3 regions, huge study. And they found that the vast majority, looks like about 60% of the wolves, the moose, died from health-related issues. The small little pie slices, sorry, there's no laser. The small pie, these are predation. This is unknown. This is humans. Predation here includes lions, wolves, bears. But does anybody want to take a guess what the health-related is? I was kind of shocked. Any guesses?
Ticks.
What's that?
Ticks.
Yeah, Gary, you've been reading the literature. Yeah, it was ticks. So the biggest killer of moose is disease. Ticks, they get lungworm, they get an arterial worm, carotid. So this is a healthy moose. This is a moose that's heavily infested with ticks. Doesn't have any hair, it will never survive a winter. This is a carotid artery worm, that's the standard tick. So yeah, that's the biggest enemy of the moose, is a predator the size of a pencil eraser. It's amazing. So they did a large, Fish, Wildlife and Parks also did a study, Kelly Prophet et al., what caused the most elk mortality, and it was found that was lions. This is in the Bitterroot study. It was a long study. Many lions were collared, and elk and wolves, and they looked at black bears. And I was kind of surprised because I thought it was going to be wolves. But lions are the biggest killer of elk. Also, Fish, Wildlife and Parks also did a mule deer study. And again, it was in 3 regions, northwest Montana. And they found that mountain lions were the biggest killers of the deer. So there's all this data that shows all these different factors. You know, black bears are pretty effective predators on young ungulates, and grizzly bears kill a lot of elk calves. And there's a lot of things. Winter is the biggest killer of our ungulates. A bad winter does a really severe number on our predators. So I can go through all these talks and data and tell people what the sources are, and invariably, when, especially if I'm talking to a sportsman's group, some guy in the back will stand up and will say, yeah, but the wolves are killing all the elk. So it's like, how do you overcome biases that are ingrained when people don't listen to the science? And this is a challenge that kind of led me to do this book. So there's a lot of science that shows, yes, wolves eat deer and elk and cattle and sheep, but they're not the worst predator out there. Livestock depredations, we are a ranching state. When wolves get into calves, it's not pretty for sure, but the Montana Livestock Loss Board makes payments for depredations, and they're not lovers of any great wolves or anything. But grizzly bears kill more livestock. Wolves are in the middle, and lions are at the bottom. So they all kill livestock. But all you ever hear about is the wolf. The state is not trying to eliminate the lion population down to 450 lions. You know, it's just, it's a psychological thing, I mean, that people obsess about wolves. So there's a lot of things you can do to guard your livestock against wolves. Electric fences, flattery. The most efficient and effective method is to have a person out there on the landscape, like a range rider program. They got a great program at the Blackfoot Challenge, Trago, Tall Minor Basin. This chart depicts the wolf harvest rate, and the wolf harvest started in 2009, and it's been going up and up and up until about 2020, when our legislators and the governor significantly liberalized the means of take and the length of seasons, and it's just been dropping off slowly. The wolf harvest, kind of stable to declining. Last year, almost 300 wolves were killed, 297 in the last season. The IPOM estimates, which we're not going to get into, but it's the way the state counts wolves nowadays, and they have the same sort of a trend that 2011. The population peaked, if you look at the top of these bars, and it's just been kind of steady, stable to slightly declining ever since. So the goal of increasing harvest through trapping and hunting is to decrease the wolf numbers, and I'd say it looks like it's probably happening. Most all wolf mortality that we know about is due to humans, some legal, some illegal. And people say, well, if you don't kill the wolves, they're going to take over everywhere. So I just have to show some data from Yellowstone Park. They reintroduced the wolves in '95, just that handful of wolves. They shot up like any island population when it's colonized by a new species. They shot up and they peaked in about 2003, 2004. And then so they started with the 31, and then they went up to about 165, and now it's leveled off. And the population is stabilized at about 100 to 110. Anybody know what the main cause of mortality is for the wolves in Yellowstone Park? Wolves killing other wolves. So if you don't have human hunting pressure on wolves, just like us, protect our territories lethally. We protect our homes against intruders. The wolves do the same thing. So it's a clear graph of what goes on with the native wolf population. Historic wolf range, again, we have to just show a little different view of it. And these are the Mexican wolves, which you often hear about. So here's the 2024 estimates. So what was really amazing to me was when I came here to Montana in '79, there was 900 to 1,000 wolves in Minnesota, 25 in Isle Royale, and maybe 4 or 5 in Wisconsin, and 1 in Montana, theoretically. 1 that we had collared. There might have been another few wandering around, but not a viable population. And now we have over 3,000 wolves in the West. So I've got to see the population grow from 1 to 3,000, and public perceptions and some challenges also have grown proportionate to that. So what is the future for wolves? Well, wolves are very, very, very resilient, almost like a coyote, but to a point, obviously, because we killed them all off. So we have adequate prey and habitat for them. Wolves are here to stay, pending social, political favor, and wolves they'll disperse anywhere, wherever will tolerate them. So they'll keep trying. They kill wolves out by Miles City and Ekalaka and everywhere. They won't make it out there because it's too open, but they try. So I think we find ways to create increasing tolerance for wolves in the landscape where it's appropriate for them to live. It's not appropriate for wolves to be out in Ekalaka or Plentywood anymore. It's not wild enough country for them. But I feel strongly we have to create values. What kind of a value can you have for wolves? You can have economic value. The wolf watching industry is how many million a year? Something like 35 million a year or something to the communities around Yellowstone. Ecological value for people like myself who like to learn how does all of nature work with all these different predators and prey. Could be an aesthetic value. Maybe you live in New York City and you'll never see a wolf, but it pleases you to know that out there somewhere there's wolves living in the wild. Could be cultural value. Maybe you're indigenous and you have a cultural value. And so forth and so on, knowledge, academia. Recreation can be non-consumptive wolf watching or consumptive wolf hunting. So I don't have all those values, nor does anybody, but each one of those, it has a positive value. A lot of times I just hear only negative values about wolves. So that's what I'm thinking is we need to create tolerance through creating a value. So now I'm going to have a little fun here. Have you heard about the dire wolf creation this year? It goes on and on. So what Colossal did, it's a genetics research lab, is they took it's not exactly taking DNA. They did the genotyping of dire wolf skulls there's like tens of thousands of years old, and they altered 20 genes out of 90,000 genes in the gray wolf genome, and they changed the AGCT, the amino acids, on 20 genes, and then they put this little egg and planted it into a dog, and the dog gave birth to these animals. And they're calling them dire wolves. It's like 20 out of 90,000? It's not really a dire wolf, but they're making a huge production about it. And now I just saw like a week ago that wolves are now a year old. They're Romulus and Remus and whatever. But what I see is we have the capability to produce extinct species and make them extant, but there's a reason that they went extinct. You know, the dire wolves were a really, really successful species for a very, very long time, and then gray wolves came along. Are they really wolves? Are they dire wolves? What are they? But they made the cover of Time magazine and all that. This is a long list of things about dire wolves and gray wolves, but basically the synopsis is dire wolves were here for hundreds of thousands of years. Gray wolves are newer to the landscape. Gray wolves are fast, long-legged. Think of a thoroughbred horse. They run down their prey. They can kill anything. The dire wolves evolved, they're kind of slow and big and cumbersome. Think of a Clydesdale. And they ate things that were bigger and slower. Giant sloths and bison. And so what happened to these guys is about the time gray wolves and dire wolves overlapped just a short period of time, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 years, is the planet was changing and those large megafaunas went extinct. And the dire wolves went extinct. So if you bring a dire wolf back to the landscape, if they were able to actually create a real dire wolf, what's it going to eat and where is it going to live? There's no place left now for it. So ethically, should we be doing this? This is a debatable question. Everybody's got their own values. This shows a tree where the dire wolf here split off long, 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 long ago before gray wolves. But this quote I love. Our present Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, stated, if we're going to be in anguish about losing a species, now we have an opportunity to bring them back. I mean, pick your favorite species and call it colossal. And it's kind of funny, except I find it rather frightening because I see this as a potential reason to get rid of the Endangered Species Act, because now we can create them in the lab. We're kind of going overboard with the technology, I think, in Frankenstein-ness. But one thing that we could do with this new technique is there's the red wolf, which I showed you. Remember the map and there were 17 red wolves down in the southeastern US only. There's a red wolf. It's a different wolf from our gray wolves. It's been on this continent a long time, like millions of years. And it's down to the last few individuals. And they've got a bunch in captivity. But they found a colony of coyotes living near Galveston, Texas, on the coast of the island. And they did some DNA sampling. And they have red wolf genes in them. Now, does that look like a coyote to you? It doesn't to me. But it doesn't look like a gray wolf either. So they have done the DNA testing, and they've got red wolf genes in them mixed with coyote. So what they could do if they wanted to do something valuable for conservation is they could work with that species, which is still extant, present on the landscape, instead of doing all this dire wolf hype stuff. Anyway, so I think we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act a couple of years ago, and I think it's really important, and I'm a little bit worried about the trend that I'm seeing out there, and I'm kind of worried it's going to go away. It was created by an act of Congress and the president signing it, and go away for the same reason. So as my career has evolved, I've been actually doing wolves since 1977, so almost 50 years. I have not seen a lessening of the fear and hatred of wolves, like I thought I would. When I was young, in my 20s, I thought, oh good, by the time I'm 40, people will accept wolves. No. And so you see signs like this. The biggest challenges, in my mind, for wolf conservation are to replace misinformation with science, which I've tried to do all of my career. And the harder part that most scientists don't do is they don't use language that's accessible for everybody. They publish in some academic scientific journal that the general public never sees. You know, it needs to be published in like Montana Magazine or National Geographic to do any good. So when I was researching, I started me thinking about doing this book. So my goal when I wrote this, I worked with Greystone Books, wonderful people. They said, you will not be using any literature cited. You will not be using footnotes. This is not to be written for scientific colleagues. This is like anybody you see in the grocery store could pick it up and read it. So that gave me a new license, because I've done a lot of academic writing, I have a PhD, a new license to have some fun and weave science through stories. So this was kind of fun. While I was doing this research, I looked up number of attacks on people. So annually, 4.7 million dog bites occur globally. 30,000 are fatal. A lot of foreign countries, people are killed by dogs a lot. There's 40 deaths due to dogs in the US every year. In the past 100 years, mountain lions have attacked people for 126 attacks, of which 27 have been fatal. And that number is going up now every year. Seems like people are getting it. Past year, wild wolves, in the past 100 years, 41 attacks. 2 people are killed in North America that I verified. Kent and Carnegie up in Saskatchewan, and Candace, woman up in Alaska. Past 20 years, 25 people have been killed by black bears. People don't think of black bears as predatory, but they are, and they can be really dangerous. 35 people have been killed by grizzly bears in North America. Annually, this blew me away, domestic cows kill 20 people. Annually, lightning kills 30 people. So I mean, you look at this, I'm going back to the wolf statistic, in 100 years, 2 people have been killed in North America. It's a fraction of a percentage, but it's not quite zero. Most importantly, vending machines kill 2 people every year. When people are messing around with them trying to get their free pop and the thing tips over and they get killed. So I thought about all the silliness of this, but the reality is wolves don't kill very many people, and yet people are so fearful, which turns to hatred, which turns to all these crazy laws. I thought, okay, that's it. I got to write this book. So my motivation to write it was that I saw the population in the West go from 1 to 3,000. This is my cabin at Moose City, where I did most of my research all those years ago. And the wolves are walking right past my cabin. We skied on the tracks. I didn't see them. They always do it at night, the little turds. But anyway, and I wanted to write this book to be objective and not preachy. So I don't take a viewpoint. I'm obviously passionate about wolves, but I present science through stories. I mean, it's a fun read. And I wanted to open minds with the stories and the science. And I bring it right up from those early days to where we're at right now with the challenges we're facing and what can we do. And Greystone Books has been great to work with. And so just for a little fun, I got a little video here and I want to play it. Maybe I'll need some help from Anthony to see if I could play this. Anthony, is it, let's see, can you help me here? Maybe if I just hit the next arrow?
No, I think, let's see.
So this is a wolf that I caught and it ran into a culvert. I'm just showing you the size. I'm pretty big. Look at the size of this animal. He's the alpha male of the spotted bear pack. And one of my chapters is called Bass Creek to Spotted Bear. It talks about one successful translocation of a pack of animals. But this is why I feel compelled to write and study about these animals, because they're magnificent, they're marvelous, they have a place here, and they don't have a place everywhere, but they do here. So I wanted to convey that passion to other people. I need to go. And also have a lot of fun with it. So this is sitting obviously in a blizzard, in a snowstorm with skis on my thing and the gas, and we're just out in the field taking a sandwich break, peanut butter and jelly on a bagel, my favorite field lunch. And just talk about some of the fun days of how a young person is becoming a field biologist, trials and tribulations, miscalculations, fortunately no mortalities amongst the crew. And the final note is, I love what Dave Meach said about wolves. He says, the wolf is neither devil nor saint, except in the eyes of the viewer. And that is absolutely true. Dave Meach, by the way, is 86. He's still alive, and he's still writing. He's such a brilliant man. He hasn't lost a brain cell. Just last week, he sent me an email. He says, you have to read this. I started using ChatGPT, and I put in data, and I just told it to write a scientific paper in scientific format. It had a whole entire article, like what would be in the Journal of Wildlife Management, with the abstract, the methods, the study area, the discussion, the charts. I'm like, wow, Dave, you're going to be out of a job. He's still publishing. So that's what got me to writing the book, was the desire to put a moderate voice out there and touch a lot of different things about wolf recovery. So before I close, I just want to read you, it's 30 seconds, to give you a little flavor of what the book is about. So this is the first paragraph on page 1. My pickup banged and rattled along the potholed inside road in the northwest corner of Glacier National Park. Boxes of wolf traps and jars of bait slid across the truck bed. I was in a hurry. My mind focused on the wolf caught in a trap somewhere ahead in the lodgepole pine forest. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed motion in my rearview mirror. I looked up to catch the glassy reflection of vivid yellow eyes framed by a wolf's black face looking over my shoulder from the back seat. How did I get here? So that's the opening paragraph, and then that goes into the book. So with that, I was supposed to talk 45 minutes. I would love to open it up for Q&A about wolf ecology, politics, legislation, fun stories, whatever. And you got me, so whatever you want, I'm here to answer questions.
If you do have a question, please raise your hand. I will come over with the mic so that we make sure we pick up your question on our recording.
Some of my misinformed friends have represented to me that the wolves that populated Yellowstone were Mexican gray wolves.
Sorry.
And it doesn't sound that way. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So I had that map a while back and showed you where they came from.
Right.
I don't know how to get back to it. But the wolves that came from there clearly are from Alberta and British Columbia, but our wolf did that walkabout, and they're all one population. The Mexican gray wolf, when wolves were introduced to Yellowstone, Idaho, there were no Mexican wolves anywhere except in captivity. I know because I worked on the Mexican Wolf Project for a year, and I was actually the one who opened the first pen in 1997 to 98 to release Mexican wolves in the wild. They're a totally different subspecies and race of wolves. They're all gray wolves. They're Canis lupus bailey. These are Canis lupus something else, so depending on where you are. But you can tell them, no, they don't eat tacos. These are native wolves up here from Canada. But that's a good question. I haven't heard that one before. So, any more?
I'm just curious how old you were when you had, started being interested in wolves and how that all came about.
Thank you. Back in 1977 when I started, I was really precocial and I was 3 years old. No, I can't. Just kidding. I'm 70, so when I started in 1977, I was born in 55. Yeah, I was in my early 20s. I started becoming interested in wolves when I was in high school. I started university, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I was enrolled in pre-veterinary medicine. And after working for a vet for a year, I knew that was not my calling. I needed to have something more wild, more challenging to fill my needs. So then I became engaged with wolves, and Dave Meach's office happened to be in the University of Minnesota St. Paul campus where the veterinary medicine school was. And so I just kept bugging him. Hi, I'm here and I really like wolves, and I was really starry-eyed, naive, and stupid. And I just kept persisting, like a good parasite. Persist, persist, persist. Until he realized I wasn't going to go away. And then I started volunteering on his projects and became an intern. Eventually, we're still very close friends. But that's how I got interested, and probably because Minnesota was the only state with wolves in it. So they were a topic of discussion quite often. But not the vitriol hatred that we hear nowadays. It was just incidental observations back then. Question in the back there. Yeah, I've been at this a long time.
Sorry. The red wolf. So I have read there is a conversation about whether they are a quote, subspecies of the gray wolf or whether they are complete separate species. And so I'm wondering from your perspective where you land on all that and why.
So that's a really good question. So the red wolves down from the southeastern United States have been on this continent longer, the theory, with their DNA, longer than the gray wolves. They were original wolves. They lived in Florida. They were actually originally called Canis niger, niger being black, because many of them were black. And then, it's a long story, but they basically got wiped out of their habitat and were interbreeding with coyotes because they're similar in size. And when I first started hearing about red wolves back in the 90s, Bob Wayne et al. Said they were a hybrid between gray wolves and coyotes. As molecular techniques have developed and they found more archaeological specimen skulls to get DNA from, it turns out the red wolf is a unique species all to its own. It's the same genus, it's Canis, but it's a different species. I think it's Canis rufus. They've changed the classification. And the problem nowadays is that they can live on the landscape because they're small, they can eat deer, beaver, rodents, whatever, but they're being shot constantly as coyotes. And like 2 years ago, they were at their all-time low with 17 left in the wild in North Carolina, an alligator refuge. They've got lots of them in captivity, they're breeding, but I can tell you from the Mexican Wolf Project, you take a wild animal and you breed it in captivity for a few generations, and the animal that survives in captivity is kind of a dumbed down, calmer version, and it's no longer the wild animal that's needed to survive in the wild. So using captive animals to put back in the wild, it's like a hatchery bred trout, for those of you who are trout fisher people. It's not the same. And so what we have to do is get ahead of that curve and try to work with people living in the communities amongst these carnivores, because we share the landscape, and find ways to mitigate problems ahead of time rather than get down to the last 17. It's sad. Yeah, but it's a great question. So I've switched from thinking they were a gray wolf coyote hybrid to now realizing through the DNA work they're actually their own unique selves. Good question. Other questions?
Thank you. Here in Montana, we have antelope.
Yep.
And they say the closest relative to the antelope are antelope in Africa on the plains, that there's no other species in the northern that's related to them. They're in amongst themselves.
Yes.
We think they came across the land bridge long time ago.
Yep.
How about, okay, relation, if they came from like the African plains, how about this, what do we see in South America, in Africa, Australia? Any correlations in those parts of the world taking us back to wolves or dog species?
So canid species in other parts of the world that came a long time ago. Is that what you're asking about? By the way, pronghorn antelope, I love them. And you know why they're fast, don't you? Two things. The most important thing was they evolved on this continent in North America with North American cheetahs that run 60 miles an hour. The antelope runs 60 miles an hour. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff that went on way before we were aware. That's really cool. I really like it. Down in South America, they have a maned wolf, which is long and skinny. It looks quite a bit different. They have several species. I'm trying to think, like I was just over in Nepal. They have the dhole. They have Himalayan wolves. There's Ethiopian wolves in northern Africa, but there are not wolves further south in the country. There are so many predators that are really successful in hot climates. There's this wild spotted dog. What's it called? My brain dead here.
Jackal.
Well, they got jackals. They've got hyenas. They got the African spotted dog. They kind of Cape hunting dog. Thank you. Sorry, I was up really early bird hunting this morning. I'm tired. And so there's many predator species there, and there apparently was maybe the niche of the wolf, the standard bigger canine predators full. But in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian wolf is one of the rarest species of wolves in the world, and it's okay. And it's pretty small in size. It kind of looks like our red wolf. It's kind of between a gray wolf and a coyote in size. So, and in terms of gray wolves, our gray wolf, Canis lupus, it's the same gray wolf here, Baffin Island, Europe, Russia, China, Japan, all over the Eastern Europe, Western Europe, North America. It's all Canis lupus. They can all interbreed. They have the same, even in India. There are gray wolves in India. They look pretty skinny. Well, they're built like Indian people, East Indian, right? I mean, everybody's hungry all the time, and they're pretty thin and long, red-legged, but they're really remarkable. Yeah, so there are wolves everywhere. Wolves historically have the widest distribution of any mammal in history with the exception of humans, which is kind of a neat thing. Wolves are highly adaptable and really can live anywhere, any habitat, any climate. There's wolves in the Gaza Strip. So any other questions? There's one there.
In your book, and you've had pictures up here, and it looks like wolves were giving kisses to the humans.
Yeah.
Did you ever encounter anything like that in your years of research and encountering when the wolf wasn't sedated?
That's a good point. So my friends in the bitter at Pat and Bruce, Tucker and Bruce Whitey had a captive wolf that, it's a long story how they got it. They raised it from 10 days old with a bottle, and that wolf's name was Kwani, and they would go as an ambassador wolf program. They would go all over the country to states and schools and nonprofits and Audubon and sportsmen's groups and whatever, and do talks about the ecology and the challenges of wolves. That wolf gave me a sniff on the face about that close. That's it. Wild wolves don't want anything to do with you. They don't want to be near you. They would never come up and do that. And those kind of pictures are just total bogus. They're captive. And many, many, many pictures you see, all the full frame pictures, they're always captive animals. So, but Kwani's head was about twice the size of mine, and those jaws coming right up here, and I thought, well, she hasn't bitten anybody yet. But I deal with wolves all the time, and it was a bit intimidating because this animal was not wild. It was domestic, many generations captivity, and they change behavior. They lose their fear of people. So anyway, I've never had a wild wolf ever want to have anything to do with me, ever. I always felt bad. When the last few years I was trapping and collaring wolves, I'd catch a wolf, and I'd walk up and I'd say, I'm really sorry, in 3 minutes you won't remember any of this. And I'd give it a poke with a 4-foot stick with a syringe in the end and poke it in the rump, and then it'd be out. In my book, there's several stories about capturing wolves. Yes, question, wait, the microphone's coming, hang on just a second. Hang on just for this microphone, they wanted to have it recorded. There we go.
Yeah, thank you. Just as an observation, I want to thank you for having your book made available in Audible format.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's rare.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I just have a question. It's kind of a personal one. You said you were up in the North Fork, along the North Fork.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my younger years, some parts of my summer in the 50s and 60s, in a place called Haverville, in the Big Prairie, in the center of the Big Prairie, right across from Riverside Campground on the North Fork.
In the North Fork, just north of Polbridge, about 3 miles.
Yep,
Yeah.
and the Walsh,
Yes.
right by the Walsh homestead.
Homestead,
At any rate, that's personal, but I'd just be curious if you have a comment, a story, just when I bring up that area in that context, if it's like, well, that's pretty sparse place. I didn't see any damn wolves in there. But my point is, if you just have any comment, it's just affectionate kind of place for me.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that comment. I do have one story. So the McFarlands had the ranch in there, and they had permission. They had a kind of a dude operation inside of Glacier Park. There was a written into the Homestead Clause or whatever. And in 1953, you can go through the archives in the Montana Historical Society, thank you very much, the McFarlands shot a black wolf on their ranch in Glacier Park in 1953. There's a picture of its head, stuffed mounted, sticking out of a plaque or something. Wolves were not protected in the park until the Endangered Species Act. Matter of fact, the park went to great lengths to poison trap, shoot, and kill off predators, wolves, mountain lions, etc. So that's the story I know about Big Prairie, and now you'd be happy to know that Haverville, as you call it, it's not changed a lot. There's still wolves and elk there and grizzlies, and it's a lovely, lovely place that I've skied. I can't tell you how many miles through Big Prairie in the dead of winter following wolf tracks. Nice. Really lovely. I'm glad you shared that. You don't look old enough to have been in there in 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I use 1953.
Okay. Okay, any more questions?
Okay, so I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you so much, Diane. That was so interesting.
Sure.